Some dare call it conspiracy.
Welcome to the Some Dare Call It Conspiracy podcast, hosted by Brent Lee and Neil Sanders. After nearly 20 years exploring the world of conspiracy culture, we are taking our guests and listeners on a guided tour of the rabbit hole. Our mission? To discover where the truth lies.
So Garth says, what kind of experiences are these? And I agree with you, by the way, how the internet used to be. You could go down rabbit holes left, right, and center. But yeah, it's not the same anymore.
Nothing's changed.
No, it's just framed in a different way, isn't it? But what were your family experiences that you thought, oh, hang on, I think that might have happened to me? And you notice that she doesn't really answer properly, but she says, well, okay, before anything happened to me, number one, there's my uncle's father. So Donovan's adopted son, which is Julian Jones. Julian Jones's father, Brian Jones, the founder of the Rolling Stones. So he was part of the 27s Club. And so I went down that rabbit hole of the 27s Club. Is it a ritual sacrifice? Is it a coincidence? Is it to do with making money off these individuals for the rest of their life? So there was that. I knew that my family was tied into the things just because of our connection to Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones and the strange things that happened there. And also my grandparents have always insisted that he was murdered and it wasn't an accident. But they never really went in the direction of why or what really happened. But they obviously felt that it wasn't what they said it was officially. And then obviously I do have some very early memories of when I was living in Los Angeles that I always interpreted as dreams because I didn't think that they could possibly be real, even though I remembered them as actual memories. And when I was reading about things to do with monarch mind control and MKULTRA, it's like I was reading directly what I had seen, bits and pieces of what I'd seen as a child. So there was that really, the beginning of the rabbit hole when I made that connection. And if I was desperately cynical, I'd say that basically like you've immersed yourself in conspiracy culture, you want to be a part of it, you've taken in this idea of the Satanic Illuminati Music Industry and stuff like that, and you've got to come up with some sort of explanation that memory is malleable. It serves no one but itself. Like, I don't know if you've ever given a witness statement or anything like that. Like, as you're writing it out, your brain will go, hang on, are you sure he was wearing that? Or whatever. Like, do you know what I mean? You can convince yourself. There's a very famous experiment that we've talked about numerous times. Psychiatrists asking people if they remember as a child going to Disneyland and meeting Bugs Bunny. And initially all of them will say no. And then when they come back for another session, they'll go, do you know what? I was thinking about it. And I think I do remember meeting Bugs Bunny in Disneyland. And we know for a fact that this is not true. And the reason for this is twofold. One, because it's an experiment that was done by psychiatrists, and two, because Bugs Bunny is not a Disney character and so would not be at Disney World, but people remember it because there's another one where you can do it about being stuck on a big wheel, and it can happen. This is how people are persuaded of things. Anyway, Garth says, so what are your thoughts on the 27 Club, like your personal thoughts? Well, obviously, I know there's lots of theories, but, you know, I always found it strange. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with Kurt Cobain. That was me. Like growing up, I had the long bleached hair and all of the eyeliner, the nail varnish. I loved that guy. And I was always, you know, I'm of the opinion that I think he was murdered. I think Kurt Cobain was murdered. And I think that I think that's something that's becoming a bit more mainstream, isn't it? What do you think it's about? Because it's a coincidence, because the number of them is crazy, isn't it? It's an awful lot of them now. So again, they're bouncing around with a couple of things there, basically. The 27 Club, which we'll come on to in a second, just briefly, is a series of musicians or prominent, famous people, artists, film stars that died aged 27. And there was a glut of them in the 60s that all seemed to happen at the same time. Kurt Cobain also died aged 27. We'll come on to that in a second. But there is the theory that Kurt Cobain was murdered. And there's an article here by the Music Box that discusses this. It's called Who Killed Kurt? The hard facts are this. Kurt Cobain was found in the greenhouse attached to his home by an electrician who'd been hired to install security lighting. But the body was later determined to have died on April the 5th, 3 days before it was discovered. Kurt Cobain, in case anybody doesn't know, was the lead singer and songwriter of Nirvana. Nirvana came to prominence in the very early 90s off the back of their second album called Nevermind, and they essentially destroyed hair metal and heavy metal and became the new biggest band in the world. And they sort of they started a trend of bands that actually, if you listen to them, none of them sound similar at all. Grunge, which bands like Tad, Alice in Chains, Mudhoney, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, and various others, latterly bands like Bush and stuff, which are essentially sort of, coattail jumpers and things like that. But Nirvana were an incredibly influential band. And Kurt Cobain very much shunned the celebrity lifestyle. He didn't. He wore grunge came from the fact that his clothing was grungy, that he used to wear many layered clothes because he was very skinny, and he used to wear sort of lumberjack layers of lumberjack sort of shirts and things like that, because that's the area that he grew up in Aberdeen, Washington, and that was the style. They were very much an anti-fashion punk band, an anti-fame punk band, a very, very anti-establishment and think for yourself and rejection of aspirational capitalism, essentially. So anyway, Kurt was found with a 20 gauge shotgun that he'd bought lying across his chest, and 1.52 milligrams of heroin per litre in his blood, a box with needles and drugs in it next to him, and a suicide note staked in a pile of potting soil near his body with a pencil, I believe. There was also other belongings lying around, such as his driver's license, wallet, shotgun shells, cigarettes, sunglasses, a hat, and a few other items. The Seattle Police Department ruled it a suicide immediately after assessing the scene without any further investigation. By marrying Courtney Love, the drug use was exemplified, and at one point he'd even accused her of using heroin while pregnant with their child. Courtney Love was the singer of a band called Hole. She's now very famous. She's been an actress and a sort of just celebrity. She was seen as a bit of a drain on Kurt Cobain, and they sort of modeled themselves a little bit on Sid and Nancy, the Sex Pistols fame, and heroin use sort of tied into that. Anyway, Kurt also used heroin to combat stomach issues that he'd suffered with for several years, saying in a journal entry, "I've decided to use heroin on a daily basis because of an ongoing stomach ailment that I've been suffering for the past 5 years and has literally taken me to the point of wanting to kill myself." So not only did he address his drug addiction, but his suicidal thoughts. On top of that, he was the one who purchased the shotgun, so he may have had a plan all along. It seems that through these things, as well as the lyrics, he was writing, "Suicide was always the path that Kurt would take." One of the biggest examples of this in his songwriting is a song titled "I Hate Myself and I Want to Die." But of course, almost all of his writing had depressing and concerning themes. But pain makes the best art. Another quote from Danny Goldberg regarding Kurt's suicide says, "It's ridiculous. He killed himself. I saw him the week beforehand. He was depressed. He tried to kill himself 6 weeks earlier. He talked and written about suicide a lot. He was on drugs. He'd got a gun." Now, Danny Goldberg was Kurt Cobain's manager. However, some of the things that he said there are not true. Kurt Cobain, did you know this, Brent, that Kurt Cobain's stomach issue had actually been solved, and that's why he was gone to rehab to get off heroin?
No.
There's an interview that he did, and it's one of the last interviews that he did. It's one where he's by the sea or by a body of water, and in it he says, "Yep, stomach pain's all gone. It's all gone. It's disappeared. Like, spoke to the right doctor, got the right medication, all sorted." So the idea that he was suicidal because of his stomach pain is not true. The suicide attempt 6 weeks prior that Danny Goldberg mentions is in Italy, where Kurt Cobain overdosed on Rohypnol. Now, according to who you speak to, either it was accidental or somebody had slipped it into his drink and tried to murder him. But it wasn't seen by a lot of people as a legitimate suicide attempt. Now, the song I Hate Myself and Want to Die is a joke. It's a joke on the idea that that's how the music industry and the press wrote about him, saying that he was always depressed and he was always miserable and blah, blah, blah. It was also, and the song came out on the Beavis and Butthead Experience compilation album in 1993. But I Hate Myself and Want to Die was also the working title for the album In Utero. And the record label it went, no, you can't do that because nobody will realize it's a joke. So, it also, Chris Novoselic, who's the bass player, he said he convinced Kurt to change it because he said we might end up getting sued if somebody kills themselves and says that they've been influenced by this album, then we need to change the name. He was going to call it Verse Chorus Verse, but then change it to In Utero at the last minute. But he explained to David Frick of Rolling Stone magazine that the title I Hate Myself and Want to Die was meant literally as much of a joke as it can be, calling it funny and claiming it was a reference to the public perception of him as this pissy, complaining, freaked out schizophrenic who wants to kill himself all the time. And then the article continues. On the other hand, there's plenty of suspicion around his death and solid proof to back some of the claims. Courtney has been accused for 29 years of killing her husband, Kurt, and there were lots of motives for her to do so. Right before Kurt's death, he was in the process of trying to divorce Courtney and write her out of his will. If he happened to die before these things were official, she would inherit all of his estate, and that she did. Once he died, she got an estimated $150 million. Kurt was also rumoured to be having an affair with Kirsten Paff, who was the bass player from Hole. Hole, you might remember, is Courtney Love's band. Shortly after the death of Kurt Cobain, Kirsten Paff was also found dead. So Courtney Love, when Kurt went missing, he escaped from rehab and nobody could find him. So she hired a private detective called Tom Grant to find Kurt Cobain. Now, Tom Grant thinks that Courtney had Kurt killed. Now, there was a suicide note that was left by Kurt, and it was later analysed by handwriting specialist Reginald Alson, who believed that the last part, which is the only part that makes a reference to suicide, may not have been written by Kurt, but he couldn't be sure because the only copy of the note he could analyse was a fax version, which was not in the original colour of the note. But it's plausible that maybe Kurt was sober and then he wrote the first two quarters and then intoxicated during the last, or he was too grief-stricken to properly write. But the thing is that the suicide note, a lot of people suggested it sounds like it's a retirement letter, like he's quitting Nirvana. It doesn't sound like he's wanting to kill himself. It's only the final bit, basically, where it says, please keep going, Courtney. Peace, love, empathy, Kurt Cobain. Do you know who you addressed the letter to?
Was it Francis?
It was Bodder. Bodder is his childhood imaginary friend, which, again, some people have pointed out that's a very strange thing to put to address a suicide note. This article goes on. I found that if you read the note from the perspective of him simply ending his career and not his life, it makes a lot of sense. Right up until the final four lines, which begins with, please keep going, Courtney, which is after he signed his name at the end of it, which usually signifies that the letter is complete. And directly after that is where the inconsistencies begin. In fact, it's only the last four lines that mention his family. The rest seems to address his music and the fans. The suspicion is that Courtney had found this somewhere, or maybe Kurt had already given it to her, and she used it by adding the last four lines to make it look like a suicide note. To add to this theory, handwriting samples were found in Courtney's possession, with some of the letter forms could be found in the last four lines of the note, almost as if she was trying to copy Kurt Cobain's handwriting. Heidi Harrelson was another person who analysed the handwriting, saying to investigator Tom Grant, it is possible that someone else with some skill could indeed imitate his writing, especially on those last few lines. Forensic linguist Carol Chasky also adds that the top portion of the note not only appears to be in a different handwriting, but also in a different linguistic style, meaning the way he wrote and put his sentence differed between those two sections. Both of these people were interviewed for Tom's documentary, Soaked in Bleach, which is really good. It's well worth a watch. After Kurt's death, Tom Grant began to suspect Courtney of having a hand in it. In the documentary, Grant uses real audio recordings of him and Courtney talking, some of which she didn't know were being taped. She admits to several things in these, such as filing Kurt's missing persons report under his mother's name, not her own, burning notes from Kurt that talked about divorce, changing her story, possession of the Rohypnol, which is the drug that Kurt almost overdosed on in Rome just a month before he died, when it was mixed in with his champagne, and several other things. She also discusses her anger over Kurt turning down $9 million to headline Lollapalooza. Lollapalooza was a traveling festival at the time. Also, to add insult to injury, Hole were offered a place on Lollapalooza on that particular tour. Nirvana were offered $9 million. Hole were offered 100,000. Not to be sniffed at, but not in the same league. But one of the biggest points of interest is on the logistical sides of Kurt's death. He was found with a 20-gauge shotgun laying across him upside down with the barrel in his left hand, and he had a grip on it known as a cadaveric spasm, which happens when a group of muscles that were used profusely before death become stiff and rigid immediately after death. This could all make sense towards the claim of suicide until you take into account a few other details. One, the shotgun shell was found to the left of his body, but the exit chamber was clearly pointed to the right. This means that the shell was found on the wrong side of the body, which indicates that possibly that the gun had been fired up right side up, then flipped around to make it look like Kurt had fired it himself. Also, he used his right hand to pull the trigger because his left hand was around the barrel, which is strange because Kurt was left-handed. But yeah, the position of the shell casing that shot out of the gun, it should be on the other side. It's entirely possible that it might have bounced all over the place, but it is one of the things that causes suspicion.
I'm not a gun expert, but on the shotgun, like, it ejects from the side, doesn't it?
Yeah, you don't. This wasn't a pump, so you don't have to pump it to eject the thing. But yeah, after it's shot, it just shoots out. The spent cartridge shoots out the side, just above where you sort of like where the trigger would be, essentially, so that it ejects it, and so it loads another cartridge in, so that you can then fire, basically. But so in theory, if you'd have shot it like as it was found, it should have shot off to the right of his body, but it was found on the other side. Again, the article goes on to say this is anatomically impossible. The cadaveric spasm reflects the exact position of Kurt's hand at the distinct moment of death. And for it to have flipped, his wrist would have had to endure an impossible angle. But all of this happened after Kurt injected himself with heroin and proceeded to put all of his supplies back in a box where they were found by the police. As mentioned earlier, a toxicology report stated he had 1.52 milligrams of heroin per litre of blood in his body. And that would have killed him instantly. Because heroin is injected directly into the vein, it's immediately available to the brain and body circulation. Most serious heroin users only take about 60 milligrams, which would equate to 0.420 milligrams of heroin per litre of blood in the body. To reach the amount that Kurt's blood level was at, it would have exceeded 200 milligrams injected in total. He would have been incapacitated far before he had the time to put his supplies back in their rightful place. That's not strictly true. In the Nick Broomfield documentary, Kurt and Courtney, he shows footage of heroin addicts that have taken an even stronger dose than Kurt took. It's due to, and going about their day quite sort of, unimpaired, so to speak. It very much depends on tolerance. It is an astonishing amount of heroin. And there is also the argument that, well, he's been in rehab for at least a week or whatever. Wouldn't his tolerance have gone down? So that is an interesting point, but it is not the smoking gun, excuse the pun, that it might be. So although there are indications potentially that foul play was at hand, it's difficult to say. There was a man called Eldon Hoke, nicknamed El Duce, who was the lead singer of a band called the Mentors. And he came forward and claimed that Courtney Love had tried to offer him $50,000 to kill Kurt Cobain. Now, El Duce was a bit of a shock rocker. He was looking to produce his career, and he liked to wind people up. He was essentially a troll before trolls were there. But eerily, just days after being interviewed about Kurt Cobain in 1997, he was found dead at the bottom of just near his house, having been run over by a train. Now, do you want to know two people that think that who definitely have been on the record and stated that they think Courtney Love killed Kurt Cobain? There's two people that might surprise some people that believe that Courtney killed Kurt.
Chris?
Yeah, well, Chris does. Yeah, Chris absolutely believes that because he's a suspicious fellow. But no, it's. Did you mean my friend Chris or the bass player Chris?
The bass player.
Oh, I was talking about my friend Chris. Friend of the show, Chris. No, Chris Novoselic. Now, this is the interesting thing. Like Chris Novoselic and Dave Grohl have never mentioned anything really about it. They've not really discussed it other than to sort of go along with the story. They've never entertained the idea that Courtney was involved. But two people that were convinced that Courtney was involved was Courtney Love's dad and Kurt Cobain's grandfather. Courtney Love's, to be fair, estranged father, Hank Harrison, who was the former manager of the band The Grateful Dead. He wrote a book titled Love Kills, The Assassination of Kurt Cobain, in which he claims that he thinks that Courtney killed Kurt. He says that he says in the book, he could prove his daughter's involvement to a high degree of certainty, although he doesn't believe that she pulled the trigger herself. But he suggests a financial motive, as basically like this prevented Kurt divorcing her, and she inherited his entire estate, including the royalties, I believe, to Nirvana's back catalogue. Leyland Cobain, who was Kurt's grandfather, has also said that he believes that Courtney Love had Kurt murdered. He also has said that he believes, and it's not entirely clear why he believes this, but he believes that the first suicide attempt in Rome, where he overdosed on Rohypnol, was actually Courtney Love slipping it into his drink in an attempt to kill him and make it look like a suicide. So, what is the 27 Club? Because, again, they don't talk about this. And this is going to be a running theme throughout this, that this insightful industry insider who's going to tell us all about the Illuminati and the Satanic music industry doesn't actually tell us anything about the Illuminati or the Satanic music industry, and only sort of makes reference to certain things like the 27 Club, like the death of Brian Jones. So don't worry, we'll explain it for you. So the 27 Club is an informal list of mostly popular musicians and celebrities who died at the age of 27. Although the claim of a statistical spike for the death of musicians of that age has been refuted by scientific research, it remains a common cultural conception that the phenomenon exists, with many celebrities who die at 27 noted for their high-risk lifestyles. So Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones died at age 27. Jimi Hendrix died age 27. Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison all died at the age of 27. And those four all died between 1969 and 1971. So that was the initial glut. I think the guy from Canned Heat died at a similar sort of time as well. But so apparently, though, it wasn't actually until Kurt Cobain's death at the age of 27 that this reignited and sort of gave a second wind to this theory. And people started looking back and adding other people to this list, including Robert Johnson, the famous musician who supposedly sold his soul at the crossroads. In 2011, Amy Winehouse died at the age of 27. And so a lot of people were going, well, there you go, that proves that it's a real thing. When Kurt Cobain had died, I think this is how she found out about her son's death. An Aberdeen newspaper, which is where she lived, the Daily World, I think they doorstepped. I think they knocked on the door and said, "Would you like to give us a comment? We're very sorry. Would you like to give a comment about Kurt?" And she said something to the effect of, now he's gone and joined that stupid club. I told him not to join that stupid club, with a reference to the 27 Club. So yeah, Ron Pigpen McKernan of the Grateful Dead, Dave Alexander of the Stooges, Christian Paff of Hole, Richie Edwards of the Manic Street Preachers, and Fredro Santana, the drill rapper from Chicago. They also died at the age of 27, and so have been sort of latterly added to this concept. But that's the 27 Club. So, but Coco explains it somewhat. Yeah, I think there's a spiritual aspect in the sense that I think at the age of 27, people would go through a huge change. I think that each of these people were going through a very big change in their life. I think that Brian Jones, not only did they kick him out of the band, but he wanted to form a band with Jimi Hendrix, and they wanted to form a supergroup. Kurt Cobain said that his so-called suicide letter was actually a letter written about a resignation from the band. He didn't say that. He was dead. It has been said about it. I'm nitpicking. Amy Winehouse, you know, I don't think that she was going to get any better or heal. I think that she was going down a pretty dark road. I think the people within the music industry and the people within the intelligence agencies who are connected to the music industry, who are all into the occult, they understand these things. So just to interject, this is what we're talking about. This is the thing that if you were listening to it from a conspiracy theorist perspective, you would understand. Music is a product of mind-controlled individuals. It's there to spread occult and occult satanic ritual practice to affect the world through frequency, really. And also to mold society to be more promiscuous, to be more aspirational for greed, more using of drugs and stuff like that.
And dumbed down.
Yeah, good one. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a dumbed down, placid population who just simply don't have the ability or intelligence to realize they're being conned, let alone fight back. And so that is the thing that they are spectacularly failing to explain. But if you came to it from a perspective of conspiracy theorists, you would have inferred this, and that would have been your starting position essentially. So they're into the occult, and they understand these things, that they have their astrologers, obviously, and they can understand the right moments to make things happen. But they understand that this age was an important age. They understand that they were going to make these large decisions that could impact record companies. And I think it's partly ritualistic and partly spiritual, and I'm talking about the energy of the individual, but it's also partly about money and power. So if these people were either killing themselves because of drugs or either going to leave the band or for other reasons, then that power that the band had at that moment and the direction it was going to would have decreased, and they don't want to let that power go. So they kill the front man or the face or the power of the band, and then they basically can keep that energy that's happening then, and they're alive forever. So they can keep Amy Winehouse's legacy as strong as it was forever and continue to profit off of that, and then energetically continue to reap the benefits spiritually off of her continued presence and power in the world. That's my opinion on that. Right. Thoughts?
I think the most important part of what she just said was, and that's my opinion on that.
Yeah. Very much so. So anyway, the number 27 has got occult significance in various traditions, drawing meaning from its mathematical properties, which is 3 cubed, which is apparently got associations with divinity, completion, and spiritual harmony. Its symbolism ranges from positive connotations of wisdom and new beginnings to more somber associations related to the endings of critical life transformations. In numerology, the number 27 is considered powerful and positive, often symbolizing wisdom, compassion, humanitarianism, and divine intuition. It is a higher vibration of 9. When reduced to 2 equals 7 equals 9. 9 represents completion, humanitarianism, and universal love. 2 represents balance and harmony, and 7 signifies inner wisdom. Combined, this suggests a period of spiritual growth and enlightenment. In the Kabbalah, the 27th path is the Sekel Mergash, or the path of natural intelligence, where the nature of everything found in the orb of the sun is completed and perfect. And also the 27th book of the New Testament is Revelation. So, yeah, it's just a fucking number. And like all fucking numbers, you can find any number of connections, particularly if you get into numerology, where basically, the number itself isn't necessarily the number. It's a combination of numbers or numbers put together, like it's 3 cubed, or 2 and 7 is 9, and 9's important, so 27 is important. It's like, are there any numbers that are important? Are there? And why have we only got the 27 club, right? Why have we not got more occultically significant numbers clubs? Like, what's the most occultic numbers that you could think of, Brent?
69.
69. Lots of people died at 69, although like that would be better because they could actually just genuinely hide at his old age, couldn't they? But well, let's look at, say, 33, like as in the 33rd degree of masonry. And obviously, 3 is important for various. Wouldn't it? The 33 club. So, are there any prominent people that died age 33? Well, yes, there's lots. Chris Farley, the comedian. John Belushi, the actor and comedian of Blues Brothers fame. Sam Cooke, the musician. Nipsey Hussle, the musician. Bon Scott of AC/DC. Ava Cassidy. Stephen Gately. Pimp C, who spoke out about hidden homosexuals in the music industry. They all died at 33. Also, Kerry Von Erich, very famous wrestler, died at age 33. What about 32? 32 is also a Masonic number, and apparently it's important. Bruce Lee died age 32. Brittany Murphy died age 32. Karen Carpenter died age 32. Mama Cass of the Mamas and the Papas died age 32. John Bonham of Led Zeppelin died age 32. Jay Dilla died age 32. Keith Moon died of The Who, died age 32. Brian Epstein, the manager of the Beatles, died age 32. And Bill Hicks, the comedian, he died age 32.
Damn. And I'd say like most of those people that you've mentioned are like just as good and influential as the people mentioned in 27 Club.
It's almost as if like there's sort of pareidolia quality to it, that essentially if you look for patterns long enough, you will find patterns. Also, do you want to know what's interesting about the dead at 32? Mama Cass, this is going to sound made up. Mama Cass of the Mamas and the Papas and Keith Moon of The Who fame both died at the age of 32 in the same room.
Damn. Well, that was a hotel room, wasn't it?
It was a hotel room. Yeah, I forget exactly what it was. Well, it's a house owned by another prominent rock star who his name escapes me at the minute. Might have even been the guy from The Police, actually, Copeland, something like that. Anyway, the long and short of it is they both died. It was a place that was where musicians would stay whilst they were doing recording and stuff, but they both died in the same room, age 32. Ooh. So one of the people that died age 27 is Brian Jones, and basically what she said is that she thinks that Brian Jones was murdered, and that's it. That's your lot. You're not getting any more than that. So again, we'll do it. Brian Jones, he was the original guitar player from the Rolling Stones, but he was kicked out because essentially he was becoming a bit of a fucking liability. He was doing too many drinks and drugs, and he was knocking Anita Pallenberg all over the place. More about her later. So it's well known that 27-year-old Brian Jones drowned at his home, the famed Cotchford Farm in Hartfield, East Sussex, in the south of England. However, the specific circumstances surrounding Brian Jones's death remain unclear. The 16th century farmhouse and its grounds were already firmly rooted in history before Brian Jones's death occurred. This is so weird. So Brian Jones, that recently ejected from the Rolling Stones, found drowned in the pool of his home, the outside pool of his palatial home, Cotchford Farm. You'll never get this. Do you want to know who previously owned Cotchford Farm? You'll not get it. Like, it's ridiculous. A. Milne, the author of Winnie the Pooh. In fact, in Winnie the Pooh, in the canon of Winnie the Pooh, Gallen's Lap, Pooh Sticks Bridge, and Pooh Corner are all based on real locations near Cotchford's 100-acre wood. So I wonder if it's not more likely that the real culprit to avenge A. Milne was clearly Christopher Robin. He must have killed Brian Jones, and I think that's why Eeyore looks so very, very depressed, because he witnessed it and he's got to take that dark secret to his grave. Anyway, Brian Jones was found at the bottom of his swimming pool, and the official cause of death was death by misadventure, with his liver and heart found to have been hugely enlarged from alcohol and drug abuse. So he had this minder, a guy called Tom Keelock, and he had, shall we say, underworld connections. And he hired some people to basically renovate the property, because apparently, like, it was going a bit to rack and ruin. And he brought in a construction company that was led by a man he knew named Frank Thorogood. Now, the crew and Thorogood basically sort of took advantage of Jones's celebrity. They moved in, they partied, they were freeloading off of him, and they didn't actually do any work. They basically just, like, helped themselves to his mansion, were swimming in the pool, doing his drugs, drinking his drink. There's actually a really good film about it that's got, what's his fucking name? Paddy Considine as Frank Thorogood in it, and that's well worth a watch. I forget what it's called at the time, but I'm sure you can find it. So they're basically there taking the piss and not doing any work. And on one day, Brian Jones told Thorogood that that's it, we're kicking you out, I'm sacking you, you and all the builders need to leave the property immediately. That afternoon, he was dead. Now, the cause of Brian Jones's death was listed as drowning, but then changed to death by misadventure. And now this is one of the things that sort of sparks the idea that he was murdered. It was reported that there was fresh water in his lungs. Christ knows what type of water was in his swimming pool, but this was a thing that was made a big deal by LA Weekly, that there was fresh water in his lungs. He also had alcohol, about 3 beers worth, uppers and downers in his system. But he was seen as someone with a high tolerance for drugs and alcohol, and he was also a strong swimmer. So accidental drowning didn't seem like the most likely scenario. Now, this fresh water thing, he had a trough, like for horses to drink out of and whatnot, that had fresh water in it. And some people have suggested that he was drowned there and then thrown in the pool to make it look like he drowned by accident. Although I've searched absolutely everywhere, and the only reference that I could find to this fresh water appears in the LA Weekly, and then it's repeated after that. So I think that was actually, I think that might be a fabricated or a misunderstood aspect of the story. But because, as I say, what type of water would he have had in the pool? But who knows anyway.
Chlorinated water.
Yeah, I suppose. It might have been that. So that could have been the thing. Although it's entirely possible that he didn't put any chlorine in it or whatever, because, he's letting his house go to rack and ruin. He's off his tits on drugs to the point where he's possibly drowned because who knows? But so anyway, the police have reopened and closed this case several times. The main suspect being Frank Thorogood, the builder that Brian Jones kicked out on the day that he was found dead. And the reason for this is twofold. One, his connection to the underworld fixer that Brian Jones had, Tom Keelock, and two, that later it was discovered that he was a bit of a violent man, Thorogood. He had a mistress, and he was this close to beating her to death. The suggestion is that he beat her really badly because she might have been going to the police to tell the police that he killed Brian Jones. But that is speculative. There was also an account, there was a statement by Anna Wallin, who was basically a friend of Brian's, who was told to go back to Sweden by the Rolling Stones management directly after Brian's death. She said, "I don't know if Frank meant to kill Brian. Maybe it was horseplay in the pool that went wrong, but I knew all along that he did not die a natural death. I'm still sure of it." Now, Keylock also later, who was the underworld guy, later came to admit that he was at Cochford that night, although he had said other times that he was nowhere near the property, so nothing could have happened. Now, his brother was Frank Keylock. Frank Keylock was a senior officer at Scotland Yard. Now, the minder said that his brother said that there was a cover-up of Brian Jones's death because the local police had made so many mistakes that it would have been A, embarrassing, and B, impossible to get a manslaughter charge against Frank Thorogood. He said, "I think the police wanted to make a manslaughter charge, but they were told to forget it. The one who could possibly have been charged was Frank Thorogood because he was the only one in the pool. But the police said, just forget it. The orders came from the very top not to pursue it anymore, and it was never pursued after that." It's also revealed that Frank Thorogood reportedly actually confessed to killing Jones on his deathbed in 1993, telling Keylock, "It was me that did Brian. I finally just snapped." However, it's also been reported that Keylock denied that this confession had ever taken place. But Keylock was also accused of burning important papers at Cochford and ended up driving around in Jones's Rolls Royce, wearing some of Jones's jewelry and his clothes after the death. So it's an absolute can of worms. The death of Brian Jones. It looks very likely that he may have been killed by Frank Thorogood. He also may have drowned. We just simply don't know. But there's a lot of gaps in it. A lot of people think that he was murdered by Frank Thorogood, essentially, and it's not beyond the realm of belief. So, but sadly, it's one of those mysteries that will probably never have an adequate solution. Garth comes back and says, "I think you're right. I think it's quite common knowledge, isn't it, really, that no one sells more records than a dead rock star. And I suppose you could even apply that to being an artist. I mean, somebody like Van Gogh. I understand, he didn't sell a painting, or maybe sold only a handful of paintings before his death. And then when he died, suddenly, he's one of the most famous artists of all time. So somebody made a lot of money off the back of him, and, he died penniless." Right, a couple of things. So Garth, Garth has said here that basically, like, nobody sells more records than a dead musician. So I've got a list of the best-selling musical artists of all time. Right? Do you want to know who the top of the list of the best-selling musical artists of all time is?
Go on.
It's the Beatles, two of which are still alive. After that, it's Michael Jackson, who, to be fair, is dead. After that, it is Elvis, who is also dead. After that, though, it is Elton John, who is only dead spiritually. After that, it is Queen, although the singer is dead, the rest are alive. And then we go Madonna, Led Zeppelin, who split up because the drummer died, Rihanna, who is very much alive, Pink Floyd, who are very much alive, Eminem, who is very much alive, Mariah Carey, Whitney Houston, who is sadly dead, and then Taylor Swift. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. The 14 highest selling artists in the world. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them are still alive. The majority of Led Zeppelin are still alive. The majority of the Queen are still alive, and the majority of the Beatles are still alive. And you'll notice that not for the first time, Eminem is positioned slightly above Mariah Carey.
Question.
Yep.
How many of those dead artists, because we got to tie it into like the previous few sentences ago that she was talking about, how many of them died at 27?
None that I can see. Oh, John Bonham of Led Zeppelin, did he die? No, he died at 32. None of them. This is the point, and this is why we laboured the point about Donovan at the beginning of this particular episode, is because basically, like, you're picking and choosing what you determine is significant. Like, for some reason, the 32 Club isn't a thing, the 33 Club isn't a thing. And, you know, again, similar example. Oh, they kill these artists because basically, like, they make more money when they're dead than they do when they're alive. It's like, I don't know if you know about the music industry or whatever, okay, but they give a fuck if you're dead or you're alive. They just won't pay you anyway. Like I get it. Like, it causes it's an advertising thing. It makes people, like, we've all seen it when Amy Winehouse died. Like, all of a sudden, people went out and bought her albums because it's in the zeitgeist. So there is an element of truth to that. But at what point do you kill them? Like, I strongly suspect Kurt and Jimi Hendrix had another album in them that probably would have done rather well. At what point do you go, now's the time to kill them, and that we have a significant enough back catalogue? Like, you know, what happens? I mean, I suppose the other, but if you don't kill them quickly enough, right, then they'll go off the boil and be shit like Eric Clapton, and no one will give a fuck if they will die anyway.
Or Kanye.
Oh, Kanye, yeah, absolutely. So,
well, let's go back to what Coco herself said: is they have the people, they have the astrologers who decide when these people should be taken out.
How do you get this job? I've worked for record companies, right? Okay, I've never seen like an astrologer, right? I've said, like, you know, I've seen a lot of A&R people who always seem to have sniffles and colds for some reason, but no astrologers. Like,
what's that quote about millionaires don't believe in astrology, billionaires do?
I don't know that one. Like,
yeah, I'm sure David Icke is like someone who used to say it over and over. Like, yeah.
Oh, that'd be supremely ironic. But,
yeah.
But this is the point. Is like, you know, it's nonsense, really, isn't it? So, what do you know how Vincent van Gogh died? Because I didn't know.
I want to say like syphilis or something like that.
No, he shot himself. He tried to kill himself, right, by shooting himself in the chest in the middle of a field in France. But this didn't work, and he was found and taken to his brother's house, and it took him fully 2 days of agony before he died. Now, his death is widely presumed to have been a suicide attempt, like, because he had, you know, depression, mental health problems, and all sorts. But shooting yourself in the chest in the middle of a fucking field is like a weird way to go. But anyway, so how did he get famous? And again, I didn't know this. Do you know who Joanna van Gogh Bonger is?
Do you need to ask?
She was his sister-in-law. She was married to Theo, who was the brother whose house he died in. So,
okay.
Van Gogh dies, leaves all these paintings to Theo, or he takes all these paintings because that's essentially all he's got. And he'd done a couple of sort of shows. He'd sold a few things. Some people had noticed it was pretty good, but he hadn't really sort of like got the recognition that he was going to get. So then Theo dies in 1891, just a few months after Vincent. And so Joanna is left a widow, and she's got a child to support. And she's in an apartment in Paris. She's got a couple of bits of furniture and 200 works of art by this then unknown artist, Vincent van Gogh. So it just started to receive critical attention. He'd had an exhibition in Paris and an exhibition in Brussels. And he'd also had an article by critic Albert Aurier in 1890. And so his profile was on the rise. But after his death, Johanna van Gogh Bonger dedicated herself to promoting his art. She exhibited his work, sold many of his paintings, and published his letters to his brother Theo in 1914, which revealed his artistic intentions and provided further insight into his life. Now, Van Gogh's work was highly influential on early 20th century avant-garde artists, particularly the German expressionists, who were inspired by his bold use of color and expressive style. And his popularity grew steadily through the early 1900s. And by the outbreak of World War I, he was already seen as a vanguard figure in modern art history. His fame continued to grow, and he's now considered one of the world's most famous and popular artists. So, although Garth has positioned it because he's gone, well, you know, they made money off Elvis after he died, it must be the same with all these things. That's clearly not the case at all. Nobody has exploited Van Gogh, and also nobody's exploited his death in this. They've not. It's not been a case of, oh, this guy's dead, get in on the ground floor before it becomes ruined and everyone knows about it. It's not that. She struggled to make people aware of him, and he was recognized purely off the back of his talent. It was simply that he hadn't had the exposure that he would later get. So that idea completely goes out the window. The idea of using Van Gogh as somebody who was exploited after his death, someone made money off of him, knowing that he would be more saleable as a dead artist, thus making his work more of a commodity, more of a rarity. That's not the case. It isn't the case. Have we seen that with certain people, that when they die, all of a sudden greatest hits albums come out and they promote it in an advertising way and sales suddenly spike? Yeah, absolutely, because the industry is mercenary. But that in no way indicates, just like in the case of Van Gogh, that artists are being murdered in order to generate this revenue.